All right, first of all, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Rachel, you there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. All right, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
second discussion. Robin, would you pull up the agenda that's posted on our website if you're able to? There's some corrections there.
I can't pull it up what's on the website. It's
Yes.
what you see on the side in board docs. So it says public comments, approval of what's the correction?
The correction is the committee members. I think by accident you may have used the operations committee form.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
So I would amend the posted agenda to include the names of the actual finance committee members.
Okay.
Okay, just an oversight. Thanks, Robin. Any other discussion about today's agenda? No? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. All right, Robin informed me that we have no public comments. Is that correct, Robin?
Correct.
Okay.
Oops. I have to take
Take your time. We'll wait.
Melvin out. Okay.
Okay. Next up, approval of the February 20th, 2020 committee meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? No discussion? With no discussion, all in favor of approving the February 20th, 2020 meeting minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Robin, will you show us? The vote is unanimous.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Robin, as we proceed today, will you display for us each of the documents that we are reviewing as we go along?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll wait for Robin to get up the third quarter financial report, and then we will begin discussion. Thank you, Robin.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So for the third quarter financial report, the information had little effect from the COVID-19 pandemic thus far. These are our statements through March 31, 2020. So the local property tax collections at this date were on the mark at 95.1%. Prior year was 90%. As you recall, that year, in our prior year, we had a significant shortfall. So at this point in the year, we are better on track. However, March and what preliminary numbers I have seen for April, which are not yet final, are showing a downward trend. So I am a little concerned with this last quarter's revenues. But as of this point, we have collected 95%, and we will be continuing to monitor that very closely and reporting out updates to the board on that. So again, my projections for the actuals that you'll be seeing on Tuesday night continue to show about a $2 million shortfall in local tax revenue for the year that's projected at this point. So we'll monitor that very closely and continue to keep a close eye on that. As far as the tax anticipation note, we're still on page 1 here. We have borrowed an amount, we borrow a tax anticipation note annually, as you remember. This year we borrowed an amount of $14.3 million. It was a little higher than normal because of those shortfalls in tax revenue the prior year. we did have to dip into fund balance some. So there was a need to increase that TAN this year. It was drawn down in November and December over a series of 3 to 4 payments. And then the total we pay back, total was repaid in January of 2020 using the proceeds of December and January tax collections. Today, actually, I got some good news, and we have received a rebate on that, the interest that we've paid so far. So I'll refer to you to a page in the report in a little bit, but we've paid in the neighborhood of $148,000 in interest so far, but we're getting a rebate on that interest that was sent to us. The calculation was sent to us today of $108,000. So we budgeted $60,000. So with this rebate, we will be $20,000 under budget. So that's good news, and we're looking, so it makes the financial statements look a little crazy at this point in the year, but in the final financial statements, you'll see where it all nets out and we'll be under budget. So we're a little over budget in these statements today, but those will change due to this rebate as we move forward. So that's good news for us. Tax anticipation note, I just want to give kind of a prelude or preview to the Finance Committee. I am anticipating borrowing a larger amount this coming year due to the uncertainty of state and local tax revenue. So we want to have the ability to borrow more if those revenues don't come in as anticipated, the local tax revenues or the state. So those that I most worry about is the allocations in July, August, and September coming in. And those are the months where we begin to, September, October, we are lowest in cash flows. And it's hurricane season. Mm-hmm. So we want to have sort of a plan B. We want to have the ability to borrow more if we need it. And if we don't need it, we pay it back immediately and minimize the interest cost of the district. So we're in the process now of calculating how much more extra do we need. And so we'll keep you informed of that, probably have an update for you on the next meeting. And so those borrowings will be in the mid to late September timeframe. On the state revenues at this point in the year, at March 31st, we are right on track. We're actually tracking a little bit ahead of last year at this time with 67%. And again, in the general fund, we receive about $100 million a year in general funds for state revenues. So heavily reliant, 40% of our general fund is state revenue. So it's an important number for us. Federal revenues are trending a little down. Those are mostly impact aid funds and, a little bit of impact aid and a lot of E-rate funds. E-rate, as you recall, are revenues coming from the schools and libraries division of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And we are reimbursed every year for wireless internet, voicemail, phone systems, and technology infrastructure, the wiring to get to our computers. So it's sort of the behind the scenes things that you don't realize, but those things are partially reimbursed. And we are actually expecting a large claim very soon that we should receive back before the end of the year of about $500,000. So that's going to be good news to boost up those federal revenues. We're going to need it to help us sustain a good carryover, healthy carryover going into the new year, and due to uncertainties for the budget for next year. So all in all, total spending is 65.5%. Last year was 66.3%. So, pretty much on track there. And as far as our capital projects funds, there are some, we're beginning that referendum work. We're beginning to see the expenditures come through on that. And we do have some detailed reports later in the document that defines the May River editions and the River Ridge edition specifically. And those reports are given on a monthly basis to the CLOC committee, the Community-Led Oversight Committee, and we're monitoring that with them along with our cash flows that are needed to support the outgoing expenses. So I want to just make a few points. We do have a couple of areas that have shown to be over budget, and I wanted to point those out for you today to let you know that we are aware of them and we have plans to resolve them. So on page 10, as earlier in the year, the board made decisions to legal costs were allocated differently. So we allocated the board costs and then administration costs and we instead of running everything through human resources, the legal budgets, we distributed those expenses per the department that utilized those legal resources. So under facilities acquisition and maintenance, which is right here on the screen, you can I think that's it. Yep. You'll see that on the third row down under services on the far right hand column, a negative 21,593. This is actually due to $25,000 of legal services that have been charged to the facilities office, and there was no budget allocation yet this year. Again, everything in the administration is all budgeted in human resources, so we're going to be reallocating that unspent legal budget from human resources, 25,000 over to the facilities office to cover those expenses that have been used for referendum, 8% work, contractual work, and also any land type, land related or matters or easement related matters are coded to this department. So just wanted to point that out. Just below that in maintenance and operations, you'll see in the same column on the next to the last column to the right, you'll see a negative 13,549 under other objects. That is our stormwater utility fees. So annually we are billed from the Beaufort County government for stormwater utility fees. These are fees that are charged on every landowner in the county. The school district is no exception to that, and we spend about $250,000 a year in these fees. They did come over budget by $15,000 this year. Really, there's no real way of knowing what that number is going to be from year to year. We do build in an increase, but that did come over budget, and we expect plenty of energy savings in that same category. Maintenance and operations and the energy costs are in that supplies and materials column where there is currently $2.6 million remaining. So we do expect a number of savings there that can cover the utility fees, but that is something we'll need to monitor how those increases will continue going forward. So one more line item, and that is down on page 11, and it's under supporting pupil activities. There is a negative as well, and that is $17,257 in the services line. Supporting pupil activities is athletics. So our athletic stipends, coaches are paid here. So that's what's in your salaries and benefits. And the services is primarily your officials, game officials, and any other, there may be some software products like Huddle or some other, where they're taking game footage, that sort of thing. But there were some additional security officers during the winter months for some of our basketball games in particular. and there were some community issues brewing, and there was a need for additional security at those games, so those have been charged to this account. So we do expect some security savings. However, the city of Beaufort, it is my understanding that city of Beaufort has not had full coverage this last quarter of the year as some of the other sheriff's office and town of Bluffton have had. So we do expect some savings in the last quarter from the city. That coverage has been covered. Those services have been covered by the county sheriff's office. And we're working on an amendment to a contract and expect some savings there as well. So just wanted to point those few things out to you. They look a little strange on this report, but we do have some different things that are going on this year that were a little unusual, so we can adjust and make sure that those items are covered. So that is basically the extent of my report today, and at this point I'll be happy to take any questions you might have on these.
Dick, you're up.
Okay. Tanya, can you remind me about the Battery Creek Student Activities Fund negative balance of?
Yes.
Started out at 24,000 this year,
Yes.
and now it's at 7.
Yes, there were a number of, due to the transition, there was a new bookkeeping staff. There was a significant number of bills that were outstanding as a result after the transition. Some old bills that hadn't been taken care of, and were, so the last year, they experienced several invoices that hadn't been expected, were a surprise, and they were had to come from the student activities account. There were some athletic invoices for items that were ordered that had not been budgeted properly. So over the course of the last year, they've been digging out of that hole to help replenish their funds and still have some work to do. However, some of this negative balance is still due to refunds that are anticipated to come back. As you can imagine, the number of refunds has been the bulk of the spending in our accounts payable system in the last few months. Grad Bash, for example, graduation. There have been deposits made for tickets to graduation trips and for hotels that were the school was receiving funds back for. The refunds that they are anticipating from a particular hotel that was related to the graduation senior trip is $10,000 that they're expecting to come back this year. And there are a few other entities as well. So I actually reached out to the bookkeeper this week, and she sent me a couple of items, but that was the primary one, is graduation, the senior trip. So they're working their way out of a hole on this, and hopefully that will balance out at the end of this year.
Anyone else?
I'm just looking at, I think that same page, page 18. Is that correct? I think on page 18 it says at the top of it, fiscal year 2018. Is that just incorrect, or?
Yes, ma'am. That's a misprint. That should be 2020.
Yeah.
I apologize. We'll get that corrected.
I just want to make sure everything else is accurate, or
Yeah.
check it is. The numbers are all look correct based on what we previously saw. So my other question is going to be with regard to the balance for the district office. What is like the average balance at the end of a year for the district office?
I don't have that exact information. However, this balance is the collection of our, our technology usage fees primarily. And so you'll see all of these transfers with negatives. They all move up into the district office. So the schools collect the funds, and then the funds are transferred to the district office, and then bills come through on a regular basis for repairs and are paid out of that district office account. So as you can see, the expenditures are only $76,900. The primary, my instructions to the technology office was that these funds are to be spent first on the technology repairs, and that those, we should not be spending general funds or operating funds for the repairs office, because that's what these funds are intended for. So I am working on getting that balance down. It should not be at that level. So we should be continuing to bring that down and get it to a very minimum level.
Okay. So is that an accumulated amount from years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it can be used for replacement of devices as well, because oftentimes repairs, a computer may be damaged to the no return. It's either not worth repairing because it's so old, or the repairs costs exceed the value of the item. So that is something that you can use for the replacement of those damage that are beyond repair.
Because don't we have an item refresh in the budget this year?
Yes, and that is for the entire grade span of 9 through 12. So we could use some of those funds for a refresh, as long as we have enough to support the repairs in the current year.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, my mind's just going about what we have coming forward, and
yeah,
we had the community member that did the Kindles for the K through 2 and things like that. And I know that's not cheap, but then I saw this balance, which is rather high.
Yes.
And if it's predominantly been used in the past for technology items, I just was kind of putting that in my mind and talking it through.
As we're talking through this, we are expecting a number of devices to either not come back this year, or to come back damaged, a larger number than normal. So this is a perfect item funding source to be able to replenish those and to repair the damaged ones as well. So we could certainly look to these funds to replace those, help replace those that do not return by, say, August or September.
And do we have insurance, obviously, on some of those that come back completely in disrepair that are unfixable, correct? Like a replacement insurance policy?
Yes, I don't know the exact insurance information right at the moment, but I can definitely bring that forward on our next meeting. There is insurance on these items, though.
Yeah, I just wonder how much insurance covers and what our responsibility would be, that kind of thing.
Okay, yep, I'll check on that and I'll bring it forward for an update next time.
Okay, I have William Smith next up.
My question was, where can we find out how? My question is also, but yeah, the first question is, are we keeping up with how during the school year of how much money that each facility is making during sports, athletics, games and stuff like that? How are we keeping up with that?
Our athletic gate fees are deposited in student activity funds in an athletics account number. So yes, there are funds, there is a specific account for gate fees to be deposited into.
And what are we doing though with those fees exactly?
They're used to pay game officials and any other, they may pay for a piece of a warm up, maybe socks or, some smaller items, or any other, they could be used to supplement travel for this, the travel of the team for different away games and that sort of thing.
And I was just asking that because I was wondering at a time like what we're in right now, would those funds help us out? Because we don't have teams that are actually traveling right now and that are actually in motion. And I was wondering what we're doing with those funds, and as well, I know that we still have some coaches where we still paying their stipends, even though that they didn't get to finish their seasons.
Their stipends are fully paid, and they didn't finish their seasons, but many of them begin their seasons, say, in January, even though it's a spring sport. So they're playing and practicing through a period of several months. So those were paid in full this year. Those funds are used to supplement the general fund, and I think an athletic director might be I mean, I can certainly pull data to see what is being spent, but I think having an athletic director have that conversation with you as well, that would be a good idea to give you an understanding of what they use those funds for. And oftentimes the allocation from the district general fund is not enough to help them provide the equipment and the uniforms and the supplies they need for the program. So it's helping to offset those. So whether they could be redirected, legally, I don't believe that we could take those funds and reallocate it to support general fund operations because they're in what's called a fiduciary fund. It means that it belongs to the students. So they are generating those funds, and so it must be spent back on those students. So I think there are other ways we might be able to see if we can reallocate resources. I'm not sure if that's one of them, but we can certainly explore it and talk about it.
Okay, and I was just, I'll be done. I was just wondering, but my main question is even the concession stand. I was just wondering, how are we tracking the money that we receive from concession stands? How many people come in the gate? I was just wondering, is central office tracking that as well as the school district, as well as each individual school?
Well, many concession stands are run by the booster clubs, so they have their own separate accounting. Some schools do run their own concession stands, and we do have a separate concessions account in student activities for that as well by school. So each school has a series of accounts that are every club, every sport, every type of event is tracked separately.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you for that report, Tanya. I don't see anyone else's hands up here. Rachel,
sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead, Rachel.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. I just have one more question, kind of building off of what William was saying. And this is just past things that I've gotten inquiries about, but I'm wondering, I've noticed before on the listing when we've been looking at 8% projects or our capital improvement plan, that multiple page document, I've seen, like sports uniforms and things like that on there. So I'm wondering whose discretion is it up to with regard to utilizing these funds for those items? And the one that comes to mind is May River High School Band, I think, wanted some uniforms or something a while back. And I see that they have a rather large amount here. So I'm wondering who has the discretion in making that determination that these funds could be utilized for something like that?
This principal has the primary authority of that. It would have to go through an approval from the district office, but absolutely. I know some of our high schools do have some healthy balances in student activities, and they have the ability to utilize funds on items for students, and that would definitely be a good use of those funds. When the school was initially opened, it was provided an allocation for a certain number of uniforms with the stipulation by my predecessor that if the band grew beyond that amount, that they would add additional resources. I came back to honor that request the year following when I came on board in my role and allocated an additional $85,000 to the program. The program for band instruments, and instruments and for uniforms. And so the band director at that time made the decision on how the allocation of those funds would be used. So the request came that those $85,000 weren't enough, and additional resources. As your question was relating to sports uniforms, I don't believe that we generally put sports uniforms in, but we do have a regular refresh cycle for band uniforms in these in the 8% funds. And we do have a cycle, and I don't recall whether it's 3-year, 4-year cycle. One of those is the cycle for our high schools to receive new uniforms on a regular basis. Last year was the first year I identified that not only did May River need or requested additional band instruments, but a number of schools were speaking out that they had a great need for band instruments, and there was no ability for the school to be able to buy them with their general fund allocation. And so I requested an inventory of the need district-wide in middle schools and high schools, and I have a 4-year refresh cycle of allocating an amount of money. I think it's $178,000 in the current year, so that each year we put funding in 8% for band instruments, and then the schools that are exhibiting the greatest need would be refreshed first. So I have a schedule of when those will be done so that we have some sort of funding in to 8% for those instruments. Generally, they're buying instruments that are not able to be purchased, are so expensive that a student could not buy them. So it's not going to be piccolos and flutes and clarinets. It's going to be tubas and drums and saxophones and very expensive equipment like that would remain in the inventory of the school. So, so we do have a resource for them now for band instruments and uniforms in 8% funds.
But the principals could, if they decided they wanted them earlier than that refresh, they certainly do have the ability to use this fund balance.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, okay. Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Yes, William.
Also speaking of that, did you have a request for either the band room at Beaufort High School or some band equipment? Because I was told from parents that Beaufort High School band room has a very strong mold problem going on in there, and the uniforms were damaged over there.
What kind of problem?
Mold.
Mold problem. Okay. I'm not aware of that, but I can ask, give the principal a call, and we can find out what the issues are, and we can address those.
Well, just a suggestion, that might be an operations piece, a facilities question. Is it with the facility, the mold?
Yes, and then the uniforms had apparently the uniforms had gotten
Oh, the uniforms were
messed up.
moldy. Okay. The uniforms were moldy, you're saying?
Actually, the uniforms and the band room was moldy.
Oh.
From the mold came on the uniforms from it being in the band room. Some part of the band room had to begin to have mold growing in there. In fact, they were having class in the auditorium because there was that much mold in the actual classroom.
All right,
Was what I was told.
I believe that Beaufort High was funded, had an allocation for band uniforms this year, but I will follow up on that and make sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Robin, do you have, that was the report that we just saw, but do you have the actual performance expectation form that, I know Tanya will need a recommendation out of committee on this report for our next board meeting, finance report. Do you have the there it is, thank you. All right.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah, we're gonna need a motion. Robin, if you could go back up to the first page of the performance expectation. There we go. So we'll need a motion on this.
Okay.
And this will be a motion to accept and not to approve.
Can you scroll to the very top, Robin? I'm sorry. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and make the motion that the Finance Committee moves to accept performance expectation 3.7 monitoring that includes PE 2B1 and PE 3.1 for a period ending March 31, 2020. Sorry, Robin, that was a lot.
I second the motion.
Rachel, I would just tweak it ever so slightly, amend it to say recommends to the full board
Recommend
to accept.
to accept. Yeah.
Okay. We have a second. Any discussion? Let me check my queue here. I don't see any hands up. All right, all in favor of the motion?
I
Aye.
the finance.
Vote unanimous.
All right. Thank you.
All right, let me get back here. Struggling a little bit to get back to board docs. Bear with me here. Okay. All right, next up on the agenda this afternoon is revisiting our committee scope. Each of our board's standing committees was tasked with revisiting our respective scopes. And I'm going to open this up for discussion.
Let's see here. I guess should it say strategic or coherent?
Well, as I recall, that was Dick's word, and I don't believe it was in reference to a governance model. Dick, you use that word. Provide a little context for that.
By strategic, we're talking about projections, anticipation. It's not going in and making sure that all the numbers add up, but instead looking at what the trends are. It's looking at problem areas identified by the CFO and asking for reasons of why the problem areas are there. Just exactly what we did today. She pointed out all the different places where the entity was over budget. And that's a strategic view. It's not going in and saying, well, how come it's only 27% spent or instead of 35% spent? So it's a macro view, but it's not a governance term, but it's more of a oversight. Strategic financial oversight is a big picture view rather than looking into a micro oversight, which would really be going in and looking at specific documents of who spent it, why did they spend it, and so on. That's not what we're doing. We're looking big picture and holding the superintendent accountable for managing the budget, and he has oversight and he has the ability to move funds around without having to come to the committee for permission to do that. As Tanya mentioned, they're going to have some savings in one area, and he has the right under strategic governance to move those funds into another pot of money, so to speak, to take care of a deficit in a particular area. So that's what I look at as being a strategic financial oversight.
Excellent.
I had one more question.
Yeah,
It's
go.
actually for Tanya. Because I believe under the organization chart, something was changing to fall under finance or maybe come out of finance department. We were discussing it during the budget discussions, I recall.
Yes. During the efficiency study, there was a recommendation that technology come out of finance and report directly to the superintendent.
Okay, so would administrative technology need to come out of our scope then? If that's adopted by Frank. I mean, right now, maybe not, but.
As of this point, that has not been done. I continue to manage that area or oversee administrative technology. So I would say at this point, it probably should remain in. And at that point, we can come back and revisit it if that occurs.
Okay.
Tanya, do you still have food service under your
Yes, I do.
jurisdiction? You do. So all of those bullet points are still in play, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next section. Okay, I've got, let me see who I've got in the queue here. John Dowling, is that you?
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on one thing that I heard. Until we implement coherent governance fully, we have a policy that any line item transfer of $50,000 or greater requires board approval. So whatever the wish is around that, we still have to follow that until there's a formal policy change.
Right. None of the transfers that I'm recommending would be over a $50,000 amount. I believe the highest was 25,000 in this case.
And I think just along that, sorry, so that John, you know, I think that same policy is still in the new draft that we're bringing forward. So I think that's going to be continuing.
Okay. So then the superintendent does not have unlimited ability to swap line items around. Correct?
As of right now, and then if we, if and when we adopt that new manual, whenever that happens.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move on to the next section. Is there anything in there that is currently in conflict with, well, Robin, just scroll down just a little bit so we see the 3 bullet points up above the primary tasks here. The Finance Committee will review information requests from constituents which do not require a formal FOIA request for document production. Other tasks include at regular intervals, and we have those 3 bullet points. I think they're still in play as our committees work. Any thoughts on that?
Do we really still need to review the procurement card program's controls? We had now 2 audits by independent folks. I mean, it might be something that you do once a year, but haven't we beaten that donkey to death with this last audit results that we had? I just don't see that we need to look at it monthly or maybe once a year.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe review any changes to.
Yeah.
Because since now, as of now, we have, you know, a certain one that we've reviewed, like you said, twice. I think we could modify it to say changes to. The only concern I have with that is, you know, as we as board members cycle through, any new finance committee comes on board, they may determine that they want to get a fresh look in a few years.
Well, I would add that it does say at regular intervals. It doesn't nail us down to once a year, every 6 months, would have you. And Rachel, do you have a motion to change that for procurement card program control changes? Reason I ask is I think Tanya had mentioned at one of our previous board meetings that there were some changes that were implemented and we were going to see them at some point in time. And that was per the report, the audit of our procurement card program. So do you have a motion for that?
I guess my question would be, Tanya, is there going to be changes to the program controls in the near future that are being worked on, or?
We are constantly monitoring it to see areas where we may need to make some changes. I'm not aware right offhand of any. I know there was a revision from the audit, the 2017 version that was used for the audit to a new 2019 version.
Yes.
So I could certainly get a copy of those changes and bring those forward at our next meeting. And I can put into place a practice whereas the committee will see any proposed changes to that we would make going forward that would make a new official revised version of that control of that policy manual. So that's something like it's very doable that we could put in place.
Okay, then
I would say we might come forward annually, something like that.
yeah.
Or if more often if needed.
Yes, I think it would work if I added changes, because then if it's at, whenever an interval presents itself where there's been a change and you can bring it to us, I think that would be necessary. So yes, I'd like to move to add or modify that bullet point where it says review of the BCSD's procurement card program controls, or changes to, excuse me, review changes to BCSD's procurement card program controls.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion, Dr. Quads? Tina?
Okay.
I agree with what's been said by Dick and Rachel regarding that line. I think it should be, the changes and annually, since we've already studied that quite in depth. And I also have a comment after you vote on this about another part of that paragraph.
If I may just make one additional comment.
Yeah.
We actually the only change I can think of in that procurement card policy, we have a description of a request for purchase of an item on the P card. We have actually automated that through this COVID-19 period. And so it's now what's called a JOT forms. It's an automated form that our staff has created that creates an automated workflow. So it may be a little different than what's described in the policy. So that might be something that of interest to the committee to kind of let you take a look at that and how it may change the policy that we have, but it's something that's working very well. And we've been able to work and attach documents online instead of managing all the paper and still trying to go through the courier during the closure. So it's worked very well.
Thanks, Tanya. John, I see your hand up. John, your hand is up, yes?
But he's muted.
No, I forgot to take it down. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Robin, can we see the motion up there, please?
I had a question.
William.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
My question was for Mrs. Crosby. At this point in time, we do have someone at the central office monitoring the P cards, correct? At all schools?
Every bookkeeper is responsible for monitoring their cards, and they can do that remotely through the internet from home. And we have our P card administrator. She is primarily working remotely as well and is able to access and does so every day. Yes, it is being monitored throughout.
Okay, yeah, because I just think that it's very important that we still have someone at central office monitoring the P cards, and the P cards fall up under, they fall up under the finances, correct? The finance department.
Yes, sir. My entire staff is working, whether they're working from home or they're working from the office, say a couple days a week. Everyone's working at this time.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you. But my question was basically is that that basically we have someone who's working on the key card on the P cards, and that if they found something, who would they bring that to?
If they bounce, if they
Found something
if
out
the card
of
was
the ordinary.
declined,
Yes, ma'am.
if there was a problem with the card, they would contact the P card administrator via telephone, as they normally would, maybe a cell phone instead of the district office cell phone. They can email, they can text, they can contact any number of folks here at the district office. Principals all have my cell phone number if they have an issue. But if there is a fraudulent charge that
Did we lose her?
Yep.
I think she got called away. She'll be back. While she's gone, I'm going to repeat the motion on the floor to review changes to Beaufort County School District's procurement card program controls made by Rachel Wisniewski, seconded by Richard Geyer. William, until Tanya gets back, are there any other questions, comments, discussion by anyone else present? Tina?
No, I'm waiting for the other, I have still a question, but it's not this, on this motion.
Okay, no problem. I just saw your hand up. All right. William, does the answer to your question, can it wait until after the committee has?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you hear me? Sorry. No.
Okay.
All right. Unanimous.
All right, Tanya's back.
Excellent.
sorry, folks. Technical difficulties.
Okay. I think Tina has a question. And I guess if you could finish William's response first, Tanya, if you would.
Sure. So if there's any unusual transactions that may be on a card and a bookkeeper has a concern, they have the ability to contact our P card administrator, procurement coordinator, or any of us at the district office to share those concerns. We're also monitoring them on a daily basis throughout the day to look for any charges. This is a time period where we're more susceptible to breaches of cybersecurity, and we're very at a heightened alert of that, and are very have alerted our bookkeepers to it as well. So we're monitoring it very closely.
Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. Let me come back into where you are. So first of all, in our current policy, the committees specifically are supposed to review I can go back out. I was starting to go into our policy manual, our current policy manual. It's the job of the committees to look at the ARs. I know you don't vote on them or whatever, but you don't have ARs in here at all. And I know you made a big point that you said you removed them from here, but I don't think you really did remove them because I was at that meeting back in November or whatever. The second comment is, this first sentence here to me is very awkward. Additionally, the Finance Committee will review information requests from constituents which do not require formal FOIA requests for document protection. So the Finance Committee is working for the public. And whose constituents are you talking about?
Okay, we can
All right.
respond to each of those. At one of our recent board meetings in recent months, and I have to get the minutes for you. David Stribinger made a motion that the Finance Committee review administrative regulations. And we took a vote, and the vote did fail. But I will find those minutes for you. It's
So what meeting was it?
documented.
I have all the minutes right here in front of me. You tell me
Okay.
the meeting, I'll look it up.
All right, sounds great.
No, tell me the meeting, Joanne, please.
Well, I don't know it at this moment in time, but I do
So
know.
what, well, roughly when? I mean, give me a ballpark.
Can I look those minutes up and present them to you following the meeting? I actually looked at them recently because I needed some clarity on that.
Okay,
And
cool.
but the board said ultimately, you know, voted that we didn't have to review them as a committee. Now,
So my question back to you then would be,
yeah,
board policy 3.2, I have it in front of me.
yeah,
Roman numeral 9D, approval of scheduled performance expectations, matters on the board's annual work plan, relevant administrative regulations, and other similar matters are to be added to the committee agenda. So then that would be a change in policy. Was it a 2/3 vote?
when was that introduced, that particular policy? Is this one that was recently introduced and we haven't yet voted on it as a board?
No, I'm going right online. I'm going online with what's posted on Beaufort County School District, Beaufort
Okay,
schools.net. I'm reading
so if
3.2.
So if I may, I believe when our committee discussed this, we felt that in discussing administrative regulations, that we were to some extent overstepping in regard to the coherent governance model, in that administrative regulations are the purview of the administration and the superintendent. And while we're free to discuss them, certainly, there's nothing wrong with that. We're really not bringing forward any recommendations of any kind. That was the gist of our discussion, that it was in conflict. Any sort of focus or studying or vetting of administrative regulations was really in conflict. So I hope that helps understand, but let me take a look at who's in the queue here.
So
Robin,
Yes, ma'am.
do you, I mean, you know, I know you and I have a lot of discussion about minutes. Do you have that same recollection, and where is it?
I didn't hear, I was looking this up. The recollection, I pulled up the policy, but the recollection you're talking about is at a meeting, but
Well, Joanne's talking about it being at a
oh,
meeting.
Yeah, it was a board vote. And listen, if you can just give me a half hour to look up that set of minutes, I'm certainly not going to do it in the middle of a committee meeting right now. But there was a vote. David Stribinger made the motion. I remember it very clearly. There was a strong push for this committee to review those administrative regulations, and the board ultimately ruled no, it's not necessary. Now, what do you want me to say? I mean, I'll find those minutes for you. You're certainly welcome to find them on your own. Either way, I'm not going to stop the conducting the committee meeting to find them right now.
But you can't give me a ballpark of what month you're talking about?
I don't want to be wrong and send you on a wild goose chase. Your time is
I got it all here
valuable.
in front of me, so just approximately, just give me a month I can start looking in.
It's not a month. It's all right. You want me to stop this meeting? And
No,
find these
Joanne, I'm not
minutes?
asking you to stop. I'm asking you, can you just please estimate, and it doesn't matter if you're wrong, what month I should start looking in? That's all I'm asking.
Start January of 2019 to the present, since you're pressing.
Well, that's not helpful. So it's,
Well,
so this,
What can I tell you?
okay, well, you have this scope marked, I think at the bottom there, November 2019. So it was prior to that? Just not sure.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hand the gavel over to
You don't
Mr.
have- you don't have
Dyer
to
to
do that, that's
conduct the
fine.
meeting while I look up those minutes for you, Dr. Quads.
You don't have to do that.
No,
Right.
I'm happy to do that. You seem adamant that this needs to be determined now. And I'm happy to find it. Mr. Geyer, I'm going to hand the gavel to you so that I can locate those minutes for Dr. Quads. And if you would also take her second question. She had another question.
So, Mr. Geyer, can I also, and Rachel, do you guys have recollection of when this would be?
I do not.
Okay. Rachel?
No, ma'am, I don't, but
Okay.
it could have been a meeting that I was not
Yeah,
present for,
okay.
maybe
All right.
participating by phone.
All right, so my other question was, if you, Robin, can you scroll back up a little bit? Here, stop. So additionally, the Finance Committee will review information requests from constituents. And that, it just seems awkward to me, which do not require a formal FOIA request for document production. So whose constituents?
I can probably provide some information
Yeah.
about that. So back when we were crafting the scope, there had been quite a number of requests from the public regarding different costs of programs and just different requests that could come through finance. And so that's why I believe that's where that came from.
That's my recollection as well. That we had Mrs. Bissey, for example,
Yeah, okay.
a lot on the P card. There was questions about some of the software that we got from constituents. And I believe it was just given to the Finance Committee to do the research and then report to the full board on the question and the results of the research. That's my recollection.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it might be confusing because the other tasks include at regular intervals probably should be a whole nother section, or maybe even right after the food service part.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It is, that's
Just
exactly.
The formatting of it, I think, is a little bit off because it looks like it's related to those information requests, and it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And should it be, should it be, is the right word? I mean, I know constituents, but usually we think of constituents as a respective member's constituents. It's Beaufort County citizens, or I mean, we're going to take questions from, I don't think we'd take questions from Jasper County citizens, right?
No.
I don't know. Yeah.
While I'm looking, I'd like to interject that the board did approve the scope that is in front of you today, and that we are reviewing today.
Yeah.
How did you vote on this scope, Madam Chair?
I assume, I believe I voted for it, but I don't have it in front of me. I don't want to definitely
No,
say.
I'm not going to ask you to find those minutes, but I was just curious. You had quite a few issues with it, so I was curious how you voted.
I'd like
Thank you for clarifying.
for clarity purposes, just because as I'm looking at it and we're discussing it more, I would like to move that we move the sentence that begins with additionally and ends with document production to be the last, a standalone sentence at the end.
That's second. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that makes it much better.
Yep.
Joanne, do you want Dick to call for the vote on that, or do you want us?
Dick has the gavel for the
Okay,
remainder of the meeting while okay.
Any further discussion? Not hearing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Do I have that correctly? Motion to move the sentence beginning with additionally and ending with production to be a standalone sentence? Is that what you wanted?
Yeah,
Correct.
at the end of the
And the scope statement.
scope statement,
Okay.
just so you know where to put it when formatting it and everything.
Got it.
Is there any more discussion on the committee scope, or should we move to future topics?
I got a question for you, Mr. Geyer.
Go ahead.
So the meetings, the second meeting was policy, correct? Second, under meetings?
Correct?
So is that still necessary, given the fact that we now have a separate standing policy committee?
I don't believe it is.
I concur.
I don't know if we would meet or not. I just know that that standing policy committee technically isn't seated yet. So a matter of timing, I think, is the issue with that. But I don't think it's going to be a huge gap. At least I hope not.
So will you therefore go back to one meeting a month? The first part there, the second Tuesday?
It would be the second Thursday is the regular fine.
Sorry, second Thursday, okay.
Yeah.
So is that what you would do?
I think we should wait until the full committee is available to discuss this, and with Joanne looking up, I haven't heard, she may have some input for this,
Uh-huh.
and I don't want to just move on and make a change right now until she has a chance to comment.
William's hands up.
William?
In regards to the question just now, what the Madam Chair was asking, I know for several other committees, they were waiting on the Coherent Governance Committee to get done with their work to make any major decisions on the actual describing the committee's work. If that makes sense. So making that change right now, I think that would be putting the cart before the horse. I don't think that right now would be the appropriate time to make a major decision like that. One, if the committee has not been fully activated, and two, understanding exactly what the Coherent Governance Committee has actually came up with for the actual board. So, and that took place in several committees, as well as the operations committee and the academic committee. Mr. Darling, could you help me out with that? Is that correct, Mr. Darling? I mean, is that what we said on yesterday, John Darling?
John, you're unmuted.
Okay, you got me now?
Yep. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Could you repeat the question, Will?
I said on yesterday, I believe that there was said that our committee and the academic committee did not make any sudden decisions because we were waiting on the Coherent Governance Committee to come back and let us know their recommendations, and also basically let us know in which direction that we should be moving as a board, do's and don'ts, before we come back to describe our work. Correct?
Yes, the vote was unanimous, 3-0, to continue business as usual until the full implementation launch of coherent governance was scheduled.
And that was not just our committee, the academic committee came up with the same thing, correct?
Academics committee, I was present for that meeting, and they took exactly the same vote,
Okay,
3-0.
okay. Thank you.
I have a comment. I just don't believe that it's worth our time to spend a meeting to discuss policy of the finance committee until policy of the full board is finished. And once that policy for the full board is finished, then we may or may not need to go back and have a special called meeting to determine policy for the finance committee. So I think it's just redundant, and it's likely to be a waste of time if we come up with finance committee policy that conflicts with the board's policy, then we'll have to start over. So let's wait until we get the board policy finished and then decide whether or not we need to spend some extra time to specify or to adapt finance committee policy accordingly. My view.
Can I comment on that, Dick?
Yes.
The pickle that we're in a little bit with that is that the coherent governance policy manual that's coming forward requires a certain amount of readings before it's adopted. And it does have, because I serve on that committee, it does have areas for asset protection and finances and superintendent responsibilities. However, I also think the finance committee should have some type of feedback into those particular areas of the manual. So if we don't meet and then we go through those readings and adopt that, and then we have some change that wants to happen to those, I just think that from my standpoint, I'd like to make sure that there's a mechanism in place to where if the finance committee decides we're going to look at those particular policies, those particular policies can be, read on their own, as opposed to an entire manual being read again all over and complicating the process or slowing it down, if that makes sense.
I understand. When I looked at the sample coherence governance policy for finance, it was very short, it was very general, and it seems to me that it was just about right to give us the right amount of flexibility, to give the superintendent the responsibility to accomplish the mission. And I just don't see what we could say in a finance committee to put in there that is not exactly what's in that sample finance committee input. That's what I would start with and say, what do you think, full board? Does that sound right? And if so, the full board would say, yes, it does. Or the full board says, no. The full board says we need more specific policy on X, Y, and Z. And then we would meet to develop that specific policy for X, Y, and Z. That's my view of it.
And that kind of goes to one of the problems with that, though, is we don't know what we don't know. And there may be items that are in ARs or something that at a later date, it presents a perfect opportunity for a policy. And then we're tripping over ourselves. So I think, trying to avoid that scenario, but I understand what you're saying. And I certainly think there's multiple ways we could go about doing it. So perhaps this may be a good discussion for the full board to be having as well.
Joanne, are you ready to comment, or are you still in the?
Are there any motions on the floor, Dick?
No, there's not.
There are none. Okay.
Questions on the floor.
At this time, I have no input in regard to the policy piece on there.
All right. So what do you think that we go back at the next meeting and put it on Finance Committee report to ask the full board for guidance? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I was just going to make a last comment on, I know Mr. Dowling brought up the instance of the $50,000 threshold and whatnot. And that is one of the policies that on the ad hoc committee we did include, and I was trying to find it. It's in, I think it's in an OE 8 now, communicating with the board. So it's not necessarily in the finance area, but it does have that included in OE 8 right now. So there has been a crosswalk of some policies that were already done. I just want to make sure we're not missing anything. That's my last comment on that.
Good. We go back to the agenda. Okay. Can we go back? Oh. All right. So the next topic is future topics. Are there any future topics?
Dick, I would suggest, as Tina has suggested as chair, that each committee look at all of their respective performance expectations. And I don't know if that is still the chair's advisement. Perhaps Tina can speak to that.
Yes, I would still recommend that.
Go ahead.
I just had one, which is, and I know Tanya is already doing this for the full board, so it may already be coming to a full board meeting prior to when the finance committee meets again, but an update of the financial impacts of COVID, any new expenses, as well as savings.
Good topic. Any other topics?
I have PEs and update on COVID as well as savings.
Correct.
Is that what you said?
Correct.
Expenses and savings. So new expenditures or increases, I guess, and any potential savings.
Is there any other future topics? Okay, next topic is determine meeting date. Any suggestions?
I would suggest we keep with the dates that we have at this juncture, unless any of the committee members or Tanya has a conflict.
What would those dates be then for June?
And are you looking at both the Tuesday and the Thursday, Joanne?
Well, there were no motions made this evening to remove the policy development meeting each month. So that remains with Dick's suggestion to bring it forward to the board for advisement. But I think minimally we've got to keep the one, which is what, the second Thursday of every month?
Correct. For next month, the full board will be meeting June 9th because that was the date changed because of graduation. So June 9th is the next full board meeting. That's the second Tuesday. And then you could meet the 11th, which would be your regular meeting.
Yeah.
There is an ACE board meeting at 2 o'clock on the 11th.
And
Okay.
I'm on that too. But I do have a
Dick, I'm wide open, so go ahead and coordinate if you would.
How about the 10th?
The 10th would be an operations committee meeting scheduled date.
What time?
Operations meets at 4:30.
Could we meet at 6:30 on the 10th?
I can do that.
Joanne, can you meet?
I think I'm wide open. So again, if there's no conflicts by any committee members or Tanya or Robin, sounds good.
Yeah, that works.
Are you available, Tanya?
Yes.
Good. Then it'll be 10th, June 10th at 6:30.
Finance. Got it.
Okay, got it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I would like to, I found it, Joanne, so you can stop looking.
Okay.
It was on January 21st, 2020. And it was a motion, was made by the board to direct the finance committee to review the ARs appropriate for the committee. And it did fail. I don't know who made the motion, but it failed 461. So your committee is the only committee that doesn't do it then? Is that correct, do you know?
I don't know.
And again, let me reiterate the thinking behind that, which is, we felt it was in conflict with coherent governance.
No, I understand.
I think it's also in, going to, what is our policy? Oh, I just had it. Sorry, to add additional. Our present standing policy under our what is called board strategic governance at 3.9 directs the superintendent to provide all proposed administrative regulation changes to the board for review and input. So I think the idea behind that also was that if it comes to us and then it goes to the board, it was
Okay.
duplicative. Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
All right,
Have a
good
good
night.
one.
Bye.